Jada Terry played alone in the dark as the rain hit the windows of the underground jazz lounge. Not the kind of dark most people feared. The kind she had lived inside for 11 years, quiet, familiar, shaped entirely by sound. Her fingers moved across the keys without hesitation, following a melody she had written the night her family died and never quite finished. The lounge smelled like old wood, cigarette memory, and the particular stillness that only settled after the last customer left. She liked these hours. No crowds. No conversations she had to navigate with a smile. Just her and the piano and the rain doing what rain does best, covering everything. Then the door opened. She felt the cold air first. Then heard the footsteps, uneven, dragging slightly on the left. Wet shoes. Heavy weight. A body working against itself. She stopped playing. "If you're here to rob the place," Jada said, her voice calm, "I should tell you the register's empty and the owner is terrifying." No answer. Just breathing. Labored and shallow, the kind that belonged to someone fighting to stay conscious. She turned on her stool. Not toward the light, she never bothered with lights, but toward the sound of him. Whoever he was, he smelled like rain, expensive cologne, and something underneath both of those things that her nose identified before her mind did. Blood. Gunpowder. "How bad?" she asked. A pause. Then, through gritted teeth, "Bad enough." His voice was low. Korean accented English, rough at the edges, controlled in a way that told her he was used to never letting anything show. She heard him slide down against the wall beside the door. Heard the soft clink of something metal, a belt buckle, or a watch, or something worse as he landed. Jada stood. She moved across the lounge floor the way she always moved, with her hands slightly extended, reading the room through memory and air resistance. She reached him in 11 steps. She crouched down, reached out and found his shoulder, then his arm, then the damp fabric of his jacket torn open somewhere near his side. "You've been shot," she said. "I'm aware. Did you come here on purpose or by accident?" Another pause. Longer this time. The light was on. She hadn't turned a light on in 4 hours, which meant someone had left one burning in the back, and this man had stumbled toward the only warmth he could find. That, more than anything, was what made her decision. Just the image of a man following a distant light through the rain because it was all he had. "Can you stand?" "If I have to." "You have to." If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell, because this story is only getting started. And don't forget to drop where you're watching from. She got him upstairs. It took longer than either of them wanted, with his arm across her shoulders and her navigating the narrow staircase, entirely by feel while he bled quietly against her neck. She sat him on her couch. She found the first aid kit in the cabinet above the kitchen sink, third shelf, left side, always, and she worked by touch, because that was the only way she knew how to work. He said nothing while she cleaned the wound. Just breathed. She said, "You're going to need stitches. I can do a temporary close with butterfly strips, but if that bullet is still in there." "It's not. It passed through." "Lucky. I've been called worse." She pressed a cloth against his side and held pressure. His hand came up instinctively and covered hers, not roughly, just reflexively, the way bodies do when they're used to handling problems themselves. He stopped when he realized what he'd done. Pulled back. "I'll leave," he said. "As soon as I can walk straight." "You can barely sit straight." "I'll manage." Jada sat back on her heels. She tilted her head slightly the way she always did when she was reading a room. "You're not going to tell me who did this?" "No." "Or why?" "No." "Or who you are?" Silence. "That's fine," she said. "I'm Jada. I play piano downstairs. And whoever is whispering like a criminal on my couch can either stay still or buy groceries." A beat. Then, barely, she heard it. The faintest exhale through his nose. Not quite a laugh, but close to one. Like his body had forgotten how and was trying to remember. "Lee Minho," he said quietly. She nodded once. "Okay, Minho. Don't die on my couch." It was expensive. He stayed 3 days. He told himself it was the wound. The truth was something he didn't examine too closely, the strange, disorienting experience of being in a room where nobody watched him the way people always watched him. where nobody took half a step back when he entered, where nobody's voice changed pitch the moment they registered who he was. Jada moved through her apartment like she had drawn its blueprints from memory, which in a way she had. She cooked without turning on overhead lights. She found things without searching for them. She read using her fingers and listened to the city through the open window with the focus of someone who had learned to treat every sound as information. She never asked about his tattoos. Never asked about the scar along his jaw. Never asked about the call he tried to take on the second morning while she was in the kitchen, the one he thought she couldn't hear. "Whoever is whispering in my living room," she said without turning around, "is welcome to step outside." He looked at the phone. Looked toward the kitchen. Put the phone away. She appeared in the doorway a moment later holding 2 cups of coffee. She crossed the room and set one down on the table beside him with practiced accuracy. "You're still here," she said. "You told me not to die on your couch. And you listened. First time for everything." She sat across from him. He watched her wrap both hands around her mug, thumbs brushing the ceramic rim in small circles. A habit, he realized. She did it every time she was settling into a conversation she decided to take seriously. "You're not from Busan," she said. "Seoul, originally." "Running from Seoul?" "Running from a version of it." She nodded slowly. Didn't push. He found that profoundly unusual. Everyone pushed. Everyone wanted to know more, wanted to confirm what they suspected, wanted to hold knowledge of him like a currency they could spend later. Jada simply waited, and the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was just space, open and unhurried, and he didn't know what to do with it. "Why Busan?" he asked. "It's far enough," she said simply. "From Chicago." "From everything." "What happened in Chicago?" She was quiet for a moment. "Gang crossfire. My parents. My brother." Her voice was steady in the way that voices only get after years of practice. "I lost my sight in the same incident. I was 22. He said nothing. There was nothing useful to say, and he knew it. "I had an international competition lined up," she added. "Paris. 2 months later." A pause. "I played piano for the first 3 weeks after the hospital. Then I stopped for a year. Then I came here." "And the club downstairs?" "The owner is a 70-year-old woman named Mrs. Park who thinks I'm her granddaughter. She lets me play at night after close. I teach lessons in the afternoon. It's enough." Minho looked at her across the room and felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, the particular discomfort of being in the presence of someone whose life had been genuinely harder than his own. He had grown up with power, with danger, with violence as a language, but also with resources, with protection, with a name that opened every door it didn't break down. Jada Terry had rebuilt herself in a foreign city, in the dark, with her hands. "Play something," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Please," he added, which seemed to surprise them both. She set down her coffee. And she played. He didn't leave. Not on the 4th day. Not on the 7th. He told himself it was strategic. The syndicate was tracking movement patterns and staying still was safer. That was partially true. But it was also true that somewhere around day 5, when she placed his hand on the piano keys and said, "Find middle C," he had sat down on the bench without thinking about it, and that the next hour had passed in a way that hours rarely did for him, simply. She taught him nothing dramatic. Just how notes related to each other. How the piano breathed when you didn't force it. How you could find your position by feel. "You're tense," she said. "I'm always tense." "I know. I'm trying to fix that." He looked at her profile, the angle of her jaw, the slight concentration in her brow, the way she listened to his playing with her whole body, not just her ears. He was in serious trouble. He overreacted to small things, which she found endlessly amusing. A drunk customer grabbed her wrist one Thursday night when she came downstairs to close up, and Minho materialized from the back hallway so quietly that the man didn't register his presence until a hand landed on his shoulder. "You have 3 seconds, Minho said pleasantly, to apologize." The man apologized in approximately 1 second and left before he finished the sentence. Jada stood still for a moment after the door shut. "You're weirdly intense for a man who folds laundry." "I fold it correctly." "That's different from intense." "Minho." "What?" "Thank you." He didn't answer. But she heard him move back toward the bar, and she heard the controlled steadiness in his footsteps that meant he was more affected by those 2 words than he intended to be. One night late, the lounge empty, rain again like Busan, never tired of it, she asked the question while she was playing. Not looking up. Not stopping. Just asking it into the music. What does your face look like? He was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, like someone you shouldn't trust, she smiled without turning around. A small, private smile, the kind she didn't bother hiding because she knew he couldn't see it from where he was sitting. Good thing I don't scare easy. His breathing changed. She noticed that too. The sign started on a Tuesday. She noticed the footsteps first. Not his, different ones. Outside the club, moving slowly. A pause. Then moving again. The rhythm was wrong for pedestrian traffic. Too deliberate. Too patient. She said nothing to Minho that day, but she started listening more carefully. On Wednesday, she heard a car idle outside for 34 minutes before moving on. On Thursday, the frequency on his phone changed. The calls came faster, quieter, and he took them in the bathroom now instead of the hallway. On Friday night, she stopped mid-phrase. The lounge was closed. They were alone. She had been playing for an hour while he sat behind her at the small table, pretending to read a newspaper he couldn't focus on. There are 4 people downstairs, she said quietly. He was across the room and pulling out his phone before she finished the sentence, pulling up the external cameras Mrs. Park had installed 2 years ago. He looked at the screen. For men. Standing near the service entrance, spread apart in the positioning of people who had done this before. He stared at her. How did you know? The ventilation system echoes differently when there's weight near the east wall. She stood from the piano bench. They've been outside twice this week. Different men each time. You didn't tell me. I'm telling you now. He moved fast, not panicked, but with the particular efficiency of someone who had practiced emergency responses until they became instinct. He made 2 calls in rapid succession, spoke in Korean too low for her to follow entirely, and was back at her side within minutes. We need to move you, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Jada, this is my home. Her voice was steady. Tell me what's actually happening. So he did. Not all of it, but enough. He told her about his father, about the succession, about the organization he had never wanted and had spent his adult life learning to navigate without becoming something he couldn't live with. He told her he had run not out of fear but out of information about someone inside the syndicate who was moving against him. He did not tell her about Do-hyun. Not yet. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, the silence lasted a long time. Are you a good man? She asked. He opened his mouth. She added, when nobody's watching. That closed his mouth again. He sat with that question for what felt like a very long time. It was the most precise question anyone had ever asked him. Not are you dangerous, not are you powerful, not are you someone I should fear. Are you good when it costs you something? Are you good in the rooms where nobody sees? I try to be, he said. I don't always succeed. That's honest. I've done things I can undo. Most people have. Not like this. No, she agreed quietly. Probably not like this. Another long silence. I already knew, she said then. Not the details. But I knew you weren't just a man who got shot. People who live around death breathe differently. She paused. It's not the sound exactly. It's the control. The way you never let yourself make accidental sounds. The way you go still when you're processing something dangerous. She turned slightly toward him. I've been around enough grief to know what survival sounds like. He looked at her face, the quietness of it, the lack of performance, the straightforward honesty of someone who had decided long ago that pretending was more exhausting than truth. I should leave, he said. I should have left days ago. I'm dangerous to be near. You've been dangerous to be near since the first night. She stood. I chose to stay anyway. She moved toward him slowly, not hesitantly, not dramatically, just with the particular deliberateness of someone who had decided. She found him in the dark, her hand reaching the side of his face with the same accuracy she found every other thing in this apartment, through memory and attention, and the quiet confidence of a woman who had learned to navigate by feel. He stayed very still. I'm not trying to fix you, she said. I know that's not how this works. He took her hand from his face, but he held it instead of setting it aside. And then there was nothing between them except rain and breathing and the faint resonance of the piano they had just walked away from, still vibrating from the last chord she'd played, hanging in the air like a question that had already been answered. Do-hyun came on a Thursday. No call. No warning. Just the lounge lights cutting out at 9 p.m. during a light service crowd, and then, in the particular stillness that followed, the sound of a door opening with too much confidence. The customers left quickly. People always sensed something even when they couldn't name it. Minho stood at the center of the lounge. Jada stood at the piano. Do-hyun stopped just inside the door. She couldn't see him, but she could build him entirely from sound, mid-height, controlled breathing, expensive shoes on the wooden floor, the slight asymmetry of someone carrying weight on one side. Not a weapon drawn. Not yet. Brother, Do-hyun said. His Korean was flawless and cold. Do-hyun. Minho's voice was even. How'd you find me? I've been looking for a long time. I got good at it. A pause. She's not what I expected. Jada said nothing. She can't see you, Minho said. So whatever you're doing with your face right now, save it. I know she can't see me. Do-hyun's voice shifted, something underneath the coldness, something older and raw. That's why I'm curious what you told her. Without the performance. Without all the things people see first. He told me the truth, Jada said. Most of it. Silence. Do you know who I am? Do-hyun asked her directly. I know you were abandoned, she said. I know you grew up watching someone else live the life you thought belonged to you. And I know that kind of hurt doesn't make a person evil, it just makes them hollow in the shape of everything they never got. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. Compressed. Dense. Minho moved. She tracked him by sound, 3 steps to the left, toward his brother's position. None of us survived him cleanly, Minho said. Not me. Not you. He built everything on damage and called it strength, and we both paid for it. You got his name, Do-hyun said. The rawness was closer to the surface now. You got his protection. I got nothing until I was old enough to take it. I know. You don't. I'm not going to pretend I understand what you went through. I can't. A pause. But I'm not your enemy. I never was. He was. The room was very quiet. The only sound was rain against the high windows and the distant hum of the street outside. Then, softly, Jada pressed a key. A single note. Middle C. The beginning of her unfinished melody. She played it slowly. Just the opening phrase. The one she had written the night her family died. The one she had never been able to finish, because every ending she tried felt wrong. Do-hyun didn't move. Minho didn't speak. She played it 3 times. And in the silence between each repetition, the lounge felt less like a confrontation and more like what it actually was, 3 people in a dark room carrying things they hadn't asked to carry, in a city that asked no questions, in the middle of a night that was almost over. I won't stop, Do-hyun said finally. Not to her, to Minho. Not completely. You understand that. I know. But I didn't come here to hurt her. I know that too. A long pause. Footsteps. The door. Before it closed, Do-hyun said, and Jada heard the exhaustion underneath the control, the thing that had probably been there the whole time, you chose love over blood. One day, you'll learn they were never equal. The door shut. The rain kept going. Minho was at the piano in 4 steps, his hand landing on the edge of the instrument, steadying himself. She reached up without looking and pressed her hand over his. Are you all right? She asked. A pause. No. That's honest. I've been practicing. She moved toward him on the bench and their shoulders met, and she kept playing quietly, slowly, the unfinished melody again, and he stayed exactly where he was, his hand over hers, and for a while that was enough. Months passed. The Busan waterfront changed its face in early autumn. The heat softened. The jazz lounge expanded its Thursday schedule. And Jada Terry, who had not performed publicly in 11 years, began to play in small venues near the harbor with a patience that felt more like arrival than return. She wasn't performing yet. Not the way she had dreamed of in Chicago at 22. But she was playing for people again, and the distinction mattered. Minho did not disappear. He also did not become someone else. The syndicate existed. It had always existed. He understood that the question was never whether, the question was how. He restructured. Slowly, methodically, with the same controlled patience he applied to everything. Removed the operations that had no justification. Brought in people who could build infrastructure instead of just defend it. Enforced discipline in a way that looked, from the outside, like something that had simply always been there. Publicly, he was a Busan businessman with quiet resources and excellent manners. Privately, he was deeply feared. Jada accepted this the way she accepted most things completely, without pretending it was simple. She asked him once, early in the restructuring, if he was sure. He told her it wasn't about being sure. It was about doing the next right thing with the information he had. She found that answer more reassuring than certainty would have been. They did not perform their relationship for anyone. They had no Instagram, no appearances, no formal announcement. They had routines: coffee in the morning before the lounge opened, the piano after close, dinner twice a week at a small restaurant near the waterfront where the owner knew them by name and pretended not to know anything else. Sue, who had lived next door for 3 years and understood the situation better than anyone, came by on Sundays and argued with Minho about everything from Korean film to the correct way to make jjigae, which he appreciated more than he would ever say. Life, in a strange and specific way, had become ordinary. The concert hall was full. It was the kind of full that created its own sound, the low hum of an audience settling in, the rustle of programs, the particular anticipatory quiet that fell when the lights adjusted. Jada stood backstage and felt it through the floor. Nervous? Sue asked. Terrified, Jada said. Yes. Good. Terrified means it matters. She walked out to the sound of applause and found the piano by memory, center stage, slightly downstage of the overhead lights, exactly where it had been in the rehearsal she'd done twice that afternoon. She sat. She adjusted her position. The hall went quiet. She played for 40 minutes. She played the standards she had learned at 8. She played Ravel and Satie and 2 pieces she had written herself in Busan, one about the harbor at night, one about learning to cook with someone who burned everything he touched. She played the melody, the unfinished one. But this time she kept going past the part that had always stopped her, and she played it through to the end she had found, months ago, on a Thursday night after Doohyun left and the rain kept going and she and Minho sat at the piano in the dark. The applause was long. She came back to the stage later, much later, when the hall was empty and the cleaning crew had finished and only the stage lights remained, low and golden on the piano like something left behind on purpose. She heard him before she reached the wings. A single note, then a phrase, then the opening of her melody, played with the careful, deliberate touch of someone who had learned it note by note, feel by feel, in a tiny apartment above a jazz lounge with a woman who never rushed him. She stopped walking. He played it through to the middle, the part that used to be the end, and then he kept going. He played the part she had finished. All of it. Correct. Gentle. The way she had played it the night everything finally moved forward. Jada stood in the wings for a long moment. Then she walked onto the stage. Lee Minho, she said softly. She heard his hands still on the keys. How did you know? She crossed the stage slowly, moving toward the piano with the unhurried confidence of a woman who had learned that the most important navigation in her life had never required sight. She reached the bench, found his hand on the keys, covered it with hers. Because nobody else, she said, touches pain that gently. He turned his hand over beneath hers. Their fingers interlaced the way they always did, with the naturalness of something that had become so habitual it no longer required thought. She sat down beside him. And they played. Not a performance. Not a composition. Just both of them in a quiet hall, following what the other hand was doing, listening the way people do when they have learned that listening, really listening, is how you know someone is truly, permanently there. Outside, the Busan harbor did what it always did. The lights scattered across the water. The city hummed. The rain, because this was Busan and rain never needed a reason, began again softly against the high windows of the concert hall. Inside, Two people played a song that had taken 11 years and one bleeding stranger and every hard, honest, imperfect day between then and now to finally finish. If you were with me till the end, drop in the comments, what was the moment that got you? Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who believes in unconditional love. Thanks for watching. See you in the next.